Welcome to everybody. Hi, my name is Veronica Leoni, and I'm a professor at the Department of Applied Economics of the University of the Balearic Islands, as well as a member of the IATE Council, together with my colleague Oriol Anguera Terrey from the IATE, the University of Barcelona, from the Barcelona School of Tourism, Hospitality and Gastronomy. We are the co-organizer of this Tourism Economics in Focus, the IATE Research Seminar Series, which is, of course, organized with the support of the entire IATE Council. It is my great pleasure to welcome you today in this very first session of this new seminar series that we are starting running today. It will be a monthly series, and it will be held around this time so that it can work for, let's say, colleagues across the globe, according to the different time zones. So each session will be recorded, and it would be uploaded on our YouTube channel. I will be sharing the link on LinkedIn, where we also be continuing promoting the upcoming seminars. I would like to warmly thank you for being here to this very first session. And in particular, I would like to thank Professor Yang for accepting this invitation. He is also a valued member of the IATE Council. And thanks for helping launching this new series. Before we begin, I just take 30 minutes extra. Let me take a moment to acknowledge a recent loss that we actually had in our community of tourism economics. Professor Eugenia Guillot, who was not only a colleague, but also a dear friend and a pillar of our scientific community, has recently sadly passed away. He was one of the founders of this association. Actually, he was the very first president of IATE. And it is with the deepest respect that we would like to dedicate this seminar series to his memory. As without him, we would not be here today being part of this association. So with that, I will now hand the floor over to Oriol. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Veronica. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Actually, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Yang, professor and department chair at the School of Sport, Tourism, and Hospitality Management at Temple University, where he actually also serves as executive director of the U.S. Asia Center for Tourism and Hospitality Research. Dr. Yang is internationally recognized for his work in tourism economics, with expertise in fields such as tourism growth, demand modeling, financial and spatial analysis, among others. He has published over 100 peer-reviewed articles in leading journals, and he's been recognized as one of the top 2% of scientists worldwide by Stanford University. He also serves as associate editor of Annals of Tourism Research and corresponding editor of the International Journal of Hospitality Management. With such an impressive record, we are indeed very happy and we feel very honored to have him for this inaugural seminar entitled Meta-Analysis in Tourism Economics, Synthesizing Evidence, Advancing Knowledge. Dr. Yang, whenever you are ready, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I need to share the screen now. Let me see how I can share. So can everyone see my shared screen? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction, Veronica and Aurel. It's my great honor to be the first speaker of the Tourism Economics in Focus series. My name is Yang, and I'm very happy to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, depending on which part of the world are you in. So today, when IATE approached all of us in the IATE Council for topics, I submit this topic, so meta-analysis in tourism economics. And I feel that a lot of people probably not have heard of meta-analysis before, so I think it's more like I'm trying to provide an interesting topic that might be relevant to anyone who has been doing tourism economics research. Doesn't matter whether you are a traditional demand supply economist, doesn't matter whether you are industry organization or environmental economists, you can definitely find something you can leverage the meta-analysis tools and apply them in the entire domain of tourism economics. So I have a very quick brief outline here. So first we will talk about what is meta-analysis and why the meta-analysis can be very important in the area of tourism economics. So I will spend most of time talking about section 2, meta-analysis for econometric analysis, which is a very important economics tools we used in tourism economics. And number 3, number 4, I'm not going to delve any time on it, even though some of you may still have interest. Once you know this tool, meta-analysis, can be also applied for research to find the finding, to synchronize finding for structural equation modeling. Experiment design can be very popular in the area of tourism management. Experiment design can be also important for the area of behavior economics. To understand to manipulate some, scenarios to get more nuanced and, find accurate estimates on some microeconometric models. And finally, we're going to summarize why meta-analysis has a promising future. And most importantly, what can we do to successfully internalize the benefits of meta-analysis in the area of tourism economics. Okay, so just in case you have very limited background information about meta-analysis, what is meta-analysis, right? So a little bit background information. So meta-analysis is a statistic analysis of a large collection of statistic results from individual studies to integrating the findings. So in other words, generally, conceptually, the meta-analysis is a statistic analysis of statistic results. Or sometimes people will see that we are reanalyzing the data. Can we get access to the previous original data? No, we can't. And actually, we are doing a statistic analysis of the results from previous studies. Like probably if the focus of the study is the elasticity, right? So we can collect 20 studies on their relevant elasticity to get a statistic analysis. What if the interest is R squared? That's a statistic, that's a result. We can do a statistic analysis on this collection of R squared, etc. Right? So the meta-analysis offers new opportunities for integrating and combining the contradictory outcomes for analyzing the variance in effect size across different studies. Okay, so basically, right, so sometimes the results can be very contradictory. Instead, we're combining the effect size. We are trying to understand heterogeneity, which can be very, very important in tourism economics, right? So why you get a positive effect and why the other one get a negative effect? What's the reason for these contradictory outcomes in previous published empirical studies? The background, right? So advantage of reducing the arbitrary elements of traditional narrative reviews through a systematic and reproducible methodology. So a lot of people thought, a meta-analysis can be a very quantitative way to do the literature review with enough sample of quantitative results, right? So that's a very important advantage of meta-analysis. And meta-analysis can help extend the theory by contextualization, right? So when we are doing the meta-analysis, we can do the subgroup analysis, right? Different groups may have different contextualization. Or we can do something called meta-regression, a very popular tools to highlight heterogeneity in meta-analysis. So we can add different explanatory variables, and those explanatory variables can be used to capture different contexts. And the possibility of summarizing a set of empirical results when they are contradictory. We explain why they are getting different results, though this is a very growing interest in meta-analysis. From a statistic perspective, okay, if you are really, really keen on the statistic things, right? So combine a result from multiple studies. What's the benefits? Increase statistic power, improve the estimate of effect size. So basically, we are reducing the standard error. Resolve uncertainty when reports disagree, like what we said, very contradictory results, unveil factors explaining the heterogeneity. For example, the results, the estimated effect size is 3 times as large as in other studies. We are doing something like meta-regression to understand these factors which explain the variation of these results. Okay, so what's the logic of meta-analysis? The traditional methods focus on statistic significance to decide whether or not there's an effect. So statistic testing is not always suited to this task, right? So we have type 1 error, type 2 error, and sometimes people are associated, stick to different level of statistic significance, right? So the meta-analysis change focus from a direction to the direction and magnitude of the effect size across different studies. And what can meta-analysis do? We can combine effect size, like what I said, demand elasticity. If we get like 20 or 30 papers have the tourism demand elasticity, we can do something to combine, synchronize the effect size to get true effect size, true effect size of place attachment on tourist satisfaction, right? What is true pass coefficient in the TPB model, which is very popular in tourism, theory of planned behavior. More important to me is to assess the heterogeneity in effect size in different studies. What type of data is more likely to obtain significant results? Oh, very interesting. Does culture difference explain a different result or detect something called publication bias, which means, in certain type of publication format, you are more likely to observe significant result. For example, the published journal articles because they went through the double-blind, review process. The meta-analysis has been heavily used in tourism hospitality, especially in the past 5 years. We have a lot of interesting results about meta-analysis. For example, electronic word of mouth, the meta-analysis on the tourism forecasting accuracy, the meta-analysis on the tourism-led economic growth, the meta-analysis on the impact of satisfaction on travel intention or other loyalty measures, right? So what kind of procedure, typical procedure, right? So of course, like any typical research, you want to formulate a research question. In this area, it's like you are trying to formulate one or multiple economic or statistic relationship you want to investigate. For example, the impact of online ratings on hotel performance, right? And stage 2, gather studies, select studies, gather the data, and code the data, code the studies, analyze data, present and interpret the results, right? So when we are talking about meta-analysis, I've been frequently emphasizing the term effect size, right? Some of you might be very familiar, but some of you might not. So what is effect size? The effect size is the statistics we want to focus on. It's the numerical outcome to be analyzed in meta-analysis, right? So we want to make sure we are doing apple-to-apple comparison across different studies, not apple-to-orange comparison, right? So there's a lot of different signs we can use. For example, the correlation, right? So we can use correlation as the effect size. Or if you are running, let's say, logistic models, we know that odds ratio can be our effect size, right? And sometimes, more importantly, in economics, we are using elasticity, and elasticity can be another very, very meaningful effect size. Okay, why we are using effect size? Because we are consistently bothered by these p-value traps, right? So oversimplification of using p-value as exclusive evidence. We know that this p-value can be very, very sensitive to sample size. With the growing popularity of big data, we can find that if we are running the econometric analysis with large sample size, the p-value is going to drop down sometimes dramatically. Like what I said, there are other effective effect size like R square, beta coefficient, etc. Let's contextualize it in tourism economics. Why this meta-analysis is important? Because our tourism economics research sometimes can be very fragmented and text dependent, right? So there's a need to synchronize results. For example, we are using data from different state destinations, different sources. Most interestingly, we have different operational definition to measure what is tourism demand, right? And econometric method, we are very, very keen on applying the most cutting edge econometric methods in tourism economics. And, starting from the typical cross-section one to panel data to Bayesian econometric methods. And the second point is that empirical findings often appear contradictory, right? So because that may depends on destination, depends on the econometric specifications, depending on whether you have used instrument variable to correct for the endogeneity or not, like event impacts, for example, the FIFA World Cup impacts or the Summer Olympics impacts, right? So sometimes people get very contradictory estimates, and tourism-led economics growth, very typical TLE topic in tourism economics, the Airbnb and hotel effects, whether they are complementary to each other or whether they're competing with each other. So these are the very, very popular tourism economics topics that gain a lot of research attention, but sometimes we get very contradictory results from them. And there's a need to do this meta-analysis. Like what I said, relevance, like address contradictory results, quantify overall effects, explore heterogeneity, and lastly, we're trying to provide managerial and policy insight and also academic insights. Like don't use what estimates because they can overinflate, right? So we can get these results by synchronizing a large number of empirical studies. All right, so now let's take a look at an example. What is the meta-analysis and how we are applying meta-analysis in the area of tourism economics? So this is coming from a paper we published in Annals of Tourism Research 2019. Obviously, methodology-wise, it's not most up to advanced, but I just want to give you some idea about meta-analysis can do. It's going to be very, very interesting. At the same time, probably you can think about your own research topics to conduct a meta-analysis, right? So this is starting. If you have been in tourism economics for a while, you know that we are very, very interested in World Heritage Sites as attraction to quantify the impact of the World Heritage Sites designation, whether it's helpful to bring in additional revenue, additional tourists. So this paper is called Tourism Enhancing Effect of World Heritage Site plus panacea or placebo, a meta-analysis, right? So the title is very self-explained. We are interested in understanding the true effect size of World Heritage Sites, and also we want to investigate heterogeneity. Why some studies indicates positive, while others may indicate negative impacts. So, of course, background information. Everyone knows the World Heritage Sites, funded by UNESCO, a landmark or area having cultural, historical, scientific, or other form of significance. It's legally protected by international treaties, right? And it's judged important to have collective interests of humanity. We have a lot of attractions like World Heritage sites across the world, right? So they have actually three types: culture World Heritage sites, natural World Heritage sites, and mixed. Okay, in 167 states. That's data as of July 2019. It is very important to tourism, as indicated in previous literature, right? Reliable means of increasing visitor numbers, a top brand that confers a competitive advantage, especially in some underdeveloped countries. And Fire and Racket also frame this World Heritage sites as magnet for visitors because a lot of tourists are chasing for this type of qualification, this type of brand, because they thought this is going to be very high end attraction to provide very unique experience. So therefore, it has been prioritized by government and society to get this kind of World Heritage Site designation. Existing studies diverge considerably, right, on the finding. They give very different results in terms of the relationship between World Heritage Sites, WHS status, and tourism demand. So positive and significant effects. It's good, great, right? So they are helping the tourism, may have some problems, but still overall, we see a positive economic impacts. And sometimes we find insignificant effects, right? So the studies have identified insignificant effects across the world, basically. Negative and significant effects, right? Sometimes, it's even going to hurt the tourism revenue or tourism demand according to some studies. And very interesting, if you are closely following the Journal of Tourism Management, there have been econometric analysis on the effect of World Heritage Sites. They have back and forth, research notes, basically people may have different opinions about effect size from the original manuscript, so they go back and forth, write the letters to each other, and publish to really understand what is the best practice about econometric specification and the result interpretation based on this very interesting topic. Let's turn back to our study, right? So research aim was this our research objective, synthesize the overall effect size of World Heritage Sites on tourism demand and explore the moderators on this relationship. Basically, we are using meta-regression to understand what factors influence this effect size. Using meta-analysis based on augmented data set from past empirical studies, I'm using the quote unquote augmented, but basically you can access to their original raw data to run another econometric analysis or combine the different raw data together. We are using their results instead of original data. So this is the augmented data sets. So this is the way we are understanding, right? So why different results may give a different why different studies give different results on the effect of World Heritage Sites. So we basically categorize all the relevance factors into three categories. The context, basically talking about research setting, methodology, and publication outlets. So research settings include several factors like the research methods, right? Research period, the early time or later time. We don't know, right? So might be the early time is going to be more popular, or might be later time, because there's more marketing efforts to promote the value of World Heritage Site, and especially with the growing popularity of the social media, people are more likely to receive the information on the uniqueness of World Heritage Site experiences. The development level of the destination also matters, right? Developing countries versus developed countries, they may leverage this World Heritage sites differently from strategic perspective, and tourists may also perceive them different, right? Authorities in developed countries are more likely to promote labeling the status of World Heritage sites. And very interesting, we are also trying to investigate whether this unit of analysis matters, whether it's specifically from the country level, region level, city versus town level, or the specific site level. Based on the unit of analysis, we are going to expect different effect size. And what heritage types, right? Cultural heritage versus natural heritage. And some studies indicate cultural ones can be appreciated by worldwide after inscriptions, right? So, and also the cultural curiosity motivate tourists to visit these cultural attractions in this case. All right, so let's turn to the second group of factors that we are keen on to investigate. We are interested in, that is the big box, as you can see here, is the methodology, right? From tourism economics perspective, what's the method difference that different studies have been leveraged? Like we have four groups here: data, structured, dyadic data, dyadic type, and longitudinal type, which basically mean whether it's like, panel data, right? So dyadic means whether you carries both origin and destination information. Dyadic, like gravity type of modeling of data structure. The second group within methodology is variable operation, like how you operationalize the variables, how you measure tourism demand, right? So etc. That's and how you measure the World Heritage sites, whether you are using a continuous measure or whether you are using yes or no, presence or absence measure. And the model estimation, we're specifically focusing on the robust standard errors or anything related to robust standard errors like cluster standard errors, because we all know that the typical standard error estimation can be a little bit problematic in the presence of heterogeneity and let's also like time temporal autocorrelation and etc. And model specification like functional form, right? So whether we are using the double log or the log linear. And we also were thinking about whether endogeneity can be issue, but might be it's not significant concern in this research area. But in tourism economics, sometimes we do think about whether the leverage of instrumental variables can be important, specifically in the methodology perspective. And the third big category is the outlet, right? Where you publish this work, a journal type, whether it's a journal article, a conference paper, dissertation. The reason is that for the journal publication, usually you're going to go through the double blind review process, and sometimes the reviewers want to see the significant results, especially when the World Heritage sites is the major variable of interest. But of course, we also code a lot of papers. The World Heritage sites is used as control variable, right? So sometimes we don't care too much about the significance of a control variable. So that's slightly better. But typically, we really want to take a look at the publication outlets, because sometimes the preference to entertain reviewers and editor may kind of distort your intention to report certain type of estimation results. Research method-wise, we went through the Prisma literature search procedure. We use different databases. We use different keywords. Data were collected a long time ago. The screening criteria, so a tourism demand definitely need to be served as dependent variable, and a World Heritage Site number or status as independent variable. And even though I can read Chinese and some of my colleagues can read other language as well, but to make sure our results is 100% reproducible, so we keep English empirical studies only. So it end up with, let's see, 43 studies, papers collected for this meta-analysis efforts, including journal articles, thesis and dissertations, working papers, and book chapters, right? So totally, we estimate 343 effective sites. So as you can see that, for example, a single article paper, we can estimate 50 or 60 different models. So each model can have at least one effect size if they include this relevant variable. So that's why we end up with a way larger effect size. And effect size we are leveraging is the partial correlation coefficient from regression. So there's a formula how we're converting coefficient from econometric analysis to the partial correlation coefficient. So it's procedure, coding template, and pilot coding, template revision, independent coding, and cross-checking, because we are using multiple coders to code the result. And I think the most time-consuming part is actually template revision, right? So you're thinking about it's easy to develop your template from your framework, like what I said in our study, like 3 categories: research setting, methodology, and outlets. But always you want to code more at the very beginning, and sometimes when you are started coding, you will find that, oh my gosh, there's something new I want to add it. So you are trying to expand your coding template. So it's like, go back and forth. It's a very time consuming process, but at the same time, very, very useful for you to get a better understanding, and very interesting. Sometimes you will have like conflicts between different coders, because different people may perceive the same thing from different perspective, and also that engage more, co-workers, to have a more in-depth discussion about this. So I think as a tourism economist, based on my experience, I think you would definitely enjoy this process of doing meta-analysis. The first, it's a great way to apply your knowledge. And second way, I really, really enjoy the process to work this project with other co-workers or the colleagues, because you're definitely going to learn a lot of things new, a lot of things interesting. And even though sometimes you will see something is not best practice from other co-authors or authors, but you will find that this is really helping you get a better idea about your future work of doing tourism economics related research. So we're using meta regression here. This looks like a typical econometric model specification, a dependent variable. It's partial correlation, the effect size we choose. I index the estimate, J index the study or the paper. So we have a Z is a set of explanatory variables, like the factors we highlighted in the conceptual framework, and we also put the standard error of partial correlation here. So this is a very interesting part and unique part in meta regression. This is a rough way. Okay, nowadays we have more complicated way, but this is a rough way to really understand something called publication bias. So what is the publication bias? So basically, if you draw the distribution of the result, it should be something like normal distribution, right? So it should be it should be symmetric. You have equal number of, results on the left-hand side and right-hand side. So this can be this kind of coefficient can help you to better understand asymmetry, or a typical distribution of result, which can be important tool to detect this kind of publication bias. And estimation method is slightly different. We are not using OAS in most cases. We are using a weighted least square with cluster robust errors to estimate this meta regression, and we also run robustness check with other estimation methods like random effect model, because we can add a stored specific random effects there, and also GEE estimation. So okay, so this is the effect size, and sometimes we call the forest plot a meta-analysis. So each star is, we list them alphabetically according to the author's name, and we can get like the plot, a box plot, like to get understanding about what's their estimates look like. And of course, you can see that some studies, they have a wide range of effect size. In terms of the effect of WHS, World Heritage Site, on tourism demand, and some studies have a smaller range, right? And also, you see the big circle, big dots, right? There are even the outliers within the stories, because very interesting. You can still see some outliers within each specific evaluation, each specific empirical efforts in terms of their results. And also, we draw this is called, the funnel plot to get understanding about the publication bias. Like what I said, we want to see a kind of symmetric distribution. But obviously, as you can see here, if I plot it out, it looks like, the right-hand side, there are some more dominant patterns over there. It's not very perfect symmetric. So there might be this is typical symptom of publication bias. Method-wise, we are using different variables in the meta regression to evaluate, right, whether they are a factor explaining the result heterogeneity. So we include different variables like mid-year, a middle year of the research period to indicate the time of the results developing, whether all destinations located in developing countries. The country unit, whether the research unit is in the country level. How you measure the independent variable, WHS, what type you are using, whether it's all WHS or culture only or natural only, dyadic, longitudinal, two indicators indicating the data specific attributes. The dependent variable to measure tourism demand, whether you are using tourist arrival as a dependent variable or not. WSS dummy, whether you're just using dummy variable to capture the WH status or not, whether you're using robust standard errors, whether your dependent variables is log transformed, and whether work is published in a peer-reviewed journal. So according to results from the weighted least squares, like the model 1, we are trying to evaluate the effect size of SE. Actually, it's not that significant. It's not significant at all. And when we are adding other control variables, you will find that some results become significant. It's like at boxes there in red, you will find the middle year, right? So the time is interesting. And even though it's only significant as 10%, the later results are more likely to give a larger effect size. Developing countries, you get significantly higher effect size, like cultural heritage sites has a larger impact than natural heritage sites. And if you are using dyadic data, that means origin destination pair data, the effect sizes can actually go more significantly, right? So negative significant result. And if you are using WHS dummy, you're going to get a larger effect size, which makes sense, right? From the presence is more important than the growing up in terms of numbers. And also we find it very interesting, robust standard error is very important, right? So it's increased the effect size. And also we did a lot of, jackknife sensitivity analysis of matter regression. That's basically we are resampling our sample and to see what the results looks like. And generally we find very robust ideas about the results. And so we confirmed, let's go back, right? So we confirmed research method really matters. Development level really matters. Word heritage size type matters. For the data structure, dyadic type, variable management, WHS management. So it looks like demand measurement, which is the dependent variable, does not matter, at least from our meta regression efforts. The robust standard error is very important. Okay. So the typical conclusion is that positive effects on the tourism effect is larger in developing countries and it increases over time. Very interesting. And overall, the culture science brings a larger impact, right? And the estimates of WHS are smaller with the dyadic data sets, robust standard error looks like necessary to use. And there's decreasing return to scale from increasing number of World Heritage Sites. So some general conclusion we get from this meta-analysis efforts in tourism economics is, although it is no panacea, the WH effects is more pronounced in certain contexts, developing countries, when government agencies realize quicker returns on investment efforts to support. Our results also provide methodological suggestions for future empirical efforts, like, especially like, considering using non-typical standard error estimations. Right. So that's our quick example about these efforts. And I'm also going to quickly go through some of our little bit more recent topics about meta-analysis in tourism economics. So probably audience can better contextualize the method within their own research agenda to see, oh, wow, there are probably another items we can relationship we can investigate using meta-analysis. So this is the work I'm working together with Professor Jiang in Zhongnan University of Economics and Law in China. So we are basically understanding the effect of tourism development on poverty alleviation. So this is also very interesting. I thought there are not enough results, enough studies. So my rule of thumb is that at least I can get 20 qualified empirical studies. So actually, this effort came up with from almost 300 estimates from 33 studies. Okay, so we find a very smaller effect size of tourism poverty alleviation. So the effect size is negative 0.14, and it's statistically significant from 0 at 95%. So that is like a strong evidence to advocate the poverty reduction or alleviation efforts of tourism growth. And we find that the endogeneity treatment is very, very important first. So that's why you really have to consider in this specific context in the endogeneity of tourism factors as an independent variable. And also we find that the use of different measures of poverty gap, like use of Gini coefficient, can unexpectedly underestimate the negative effect size. So that is like some methodological suggestions we can offer by synchronizing these estimates. Another story is like we have been finished about competitors or complements, the meta-analysis of the effect of Airbnb on hotel performance and joint efforts with Gianpaolo and Juan Nicola, probably a lot of you guys are familiar with. We are also collected about almost 500 estimates to understand the results. I highlight very small negative result on Airbnb supply on tourism performance, very small one, and most important, we recognize very significant heterogeneity, very interesting, and We find that this competition is going to be very less pronounced for European hotels compared to Asian hotels, specific context factors. And the magnitudes of this kind of negative effect size is shrinking significantly over time, which basically means hotels are really, really not getting used to the competition with Airbnb, or another interpretation might be Airbnb are actually developing very different marketing strategy or dealing with very different demand portfolios compared to their hotel counterparts. This is one of the earliest ones started on a meta-analysis is that I was working with Shanwang Park from Hong Kong Polytech at that point of time, electronic word of mouth and hotel performance. But we are just basically using online ratings, online review volumes to understand how this affect, the hotel performance by using 25 papers at that time, not too large sample size. Different from all previous, meta-analysis I've been presenting. This one, we are using elasticity as the effect size, which is different from other efforts, right? So we estimate, right? So we get like valence-based elasticity is 0.888, and the volume-based elasticity is very small, 0.055, and we find that elasticity significantly lower in lower-end hotels. So probably they get very smaller benefits from a better online reputation, and this elasticity is significantly lower in hotels in China, and elasticity is significantly higher for online presence posted on TripAdvisor. And methodologically, we find that this elasticity is significantly lower. We're using panel data, which we believe in this context might be a better data sets to understand causality. So that's also the methodological recommendation we are providing. So using the panel data, and even though sometimes it's going to be very, very difficult to collect the historical data on online reputation for specific hotels. Okay, so we are not going to talk about meta-analysis for structure equation modeling in this specific case. I know SEM can be different in economic settings, experiment design. Just keep in mind we can also apply. And very quick summary, right? So advantage, I've been talking about advantage, but what are those limitations, right? So what's the downside of doing meta-analysis? There's a disadvantage as well, even though I'm a strong seller of meta-analysis, require huge amount of efforts, never underestimate. So sometimes you would get the entire group really, really get bored and sometimes hopeless because there's a lot of things you are arguing with each other. You can't quickly reach a consensus. And second one, it's like I've been heavily criticized for this. You are doing apple to orange comparison because some people said these two papers are not comparable, right? And the most meta-analysis include blemished studies that you think it's does not make sense. It's really, really bad studies. But you are trying to be as objective as possible, include them in sample. Various form of subjectivities, like codings and even the variable operationalization, and what studies to include in meta-analysis. Even though I'm seeing that looks like we have some criteria, but sometimes the boundary is very blurred. Okay, and coding of attributes, like what I said, I spend most of time to revising and redeveloping my coding templates, and often result or can summarize as effect size. Sometimes, there are some statistics are not reported in the paper, so we have to email or get in touch with the author to provide some additional information. So, and lastly, analysis between study difference is fundamentally correlational, right? It's not causality based. And what we can do your own meta-analysis type of literature review and purpose build, right? So, and now there's a lot of package, they can do that, including Stata. I think that in the latest version of Stata, they have a specific standalone module about meta-analysis. But what we can do as tourism economists or the researcher in tourism economists improve the reproducibility of your research, trying to be as transparent as possible about the data collection, about research methods. Of course, we have the hobby of now it's kind of required, right, to publish in top journals to do multiple robustness check, right? Even though sometimes put in the online supplementary materials, that gives us a lot of data points to run the meta-analysis. We like to see 40 or 50 different estimated effect size in a single study to do the variation that make research method as transparent as possible, right? Providing the pivot statistics for people who want to meta-analyze your studies. I know I probably run out of time. Okay, a little bit. Give me 2 more minutes. Okay, so future trends integrate big data and machine learning. So I'm going to fly to Canada next month because there's a meta-analysis in Economist Conference Consortium, which is fantastic. I've been attending handful of times. So they are talking about big data, machine learning, right? So whether the big data, the AI can help you code it. Very interesting. Now, Bayesian meta-analysis, I saw the study using Bayesian meta-analysis to understand, to better incorporate uncertainty across disciplinary synthesis, environmental psychology, urban studies, and sometimes to the simulation, provide more specific policy. So finally, do a little bit, promotion things. So 2 years ago, Professor Robotico Cross in UCF and I worked on this tourism economics, a modern guide to tourism economics, because I saw several of the book chapter contributors being here today. So if you are thinking about some textbook for your graduate level class, please think about this textbook. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. Feel free to get in touch with me if you have any question. And you can find my contacts from my homepage, dryangyang.com. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Yang, for this very insightful presentation. It was really very interesting. So now we have some minutes, like between 5 and 6, 7 minutes, for any questions that the audience may have. So if anyone would like to start, just feel free to jump into the conversation. If not, in the meantime, I'm going to ask a question myself. So I would like to, sorry, there is Veronica. Veronica has a question, so please feel free.
Thank you, Yol. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Yang, for the presentation. Very, very insightful. I have just a comment and then a very quick question. I guess that it's becoming more popular nowadays to share replication files. And we know it's very hard work, but I guess for meta-analysis, it's kind of a panacea, because if you can replicate, then of course it's easier to see where the coefficients come from. But except from this comment, obvious comment, so when you're combining different, of course, results from different studies, and of course you have some hint on the different variety in terms of quality of the paper, and as well the potential risk of bias that the different paper has. How do you actually weight the size that each one of the paper will, let's say, influence, how each paper will influence the overall average effect? Do you use a rule of thumb? Do you use something statistically sound to do this choice?
That's a very good question, Veronica. So that means tourism economists are really, looking after this man. So there's some formulas there. So largely it's like they are using standard errors based correction. If you have a smaller standard errors, like basically you have a larger weight to aggregate. Even though some people still think, taking the average is good enough. But the general rule of thumb is a formula. They are taking the standard errors, estimated standard deviations, some measures there. There are some people coming up with different weighting. So basically, we are using different weighting, right? So for example, I saw the very interesting one, like, based on journal impact. based on some arbitrary impact, because sometimes you also need to combine the conference paper. Conference paper does not have impact factor. And sometimes using the Google index of individual authors, which I think that's too much. But you are 100% correct. So from statistics perspective, the equation also gives the hints, right, based on the reliability of the paper reflected in our estimates standard errors, or we can conceptually add some little bit more subjective ratings on the paper's impact factor. But usually we are not considering the second rounds, but conceptually that can be true. They're very good questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Veronica. Actually, my question was a little bit aligned. It was about, okay, imagine that the original papers, there is some kind of estimation bias. I understand that this bias, it's also incorporated in the meta regression analysis. Is that the case or not?
That's a very good question. So yes and no. For example, if there's the problem associated with the data, like what we said, right? So if it's cross-sectional and if it's panel data, we can't correct that because the data does not have the panel data counterpart. We are more, in this case, it's more like, between study comparison, right? Just imagine that there's a very, very similar paper, right? Using very similar methodology, very similar research context. Just imagine that by accident, they can access to the panel data instead of cross-section data. That's conceptually like this. So that's why meta-analysis can provide a little bit more comprehensive findings. But actually, unlike other disciplines, sometimes in tourism economics, we end up with relatively smaller sample size, 30, 50 at most. If we can get 100 studies, we can get 2,000 estimates from 100 studies, we can get more comprehensive analysis in this case.
Thank you very much. So are there any other questions? Don't be shy. If not, I think that Veronica would like to maybe conclude.
Yes. Okay. So thank you very much for your attendance. And again, thank you for Professor Yang for accepting the invitation, for helping us with this very first session. Just some preview. I do a little bit of spoiler. Of course, I will be publishing more in details information on our LinkedIn page, which if you're not following, please go and follow us or get connected on LinkedIn. So our next session will be the 7th of October, same time. And the paper is, again, a methodological paper by Professor Andreu Sanso from the University of the Balearic Islands. It's about length biased right censored count data samples. So they apply some, it's a methodological contribution and is applied to repeat visitation. So again, I hope to see you again on the 7th of October, and you will find this seminar by Professor Yang recorded very soon, will be published on YouTube channel. And thank you, Oriol, for co-organizing this.
Thank you. Thank you very much for joining. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Paolo.
Hello, bye.